Hello and welcome to my festive home tour, and since you're here I'm going to start with my beautiful wreath that just arrived yesterday. I bought this wreath from a place called Grace and Thorn, which is a really lovely British florist. What I really love about it is that it's classic, chic and timeless. I didn't want anything too colourful, but it's definitely going to give you a taste of what's to come. One of the other things I really love about this particular wreath is its proportion. It really fills out the whole of my door and feels very festive, but because it's not so colourful, it sort of feels very grand and elegant. My favourite wreath this year. So this particular wreath is actually called a Never Take It Down wreath, and this is not an advert, but I love the fact that that's what they named it, because that was exactly the look I wanted this Christmas. Something that didn't feel like it was only festive for Christmas, but something that felt like I could take it through from January to however many months I wanted to, and it definitely does feel that way. In December you can imagine this feeling quite festive, but in January and February and March even, I might not get bored of this and just keep it up. So I love that idea, and I also love that of course I can reuse this because it's a real dried wreath. Okay, so next I'm going to go through the most prominent area, in my opinion, of the house, of course, other than the Christmas tree area, and this is my fireplace. My fireplace was really one of the favorite parts of my house when I actually bought it. I really wanted to make the most of the fire surround whenever I could. So in all festivities, you will probably see our fireplace decorated. So yesterday at the flower market, I picked up a noble fir garland. It's a real garland and it's totally fresh. So I'm not sure how long it will last, but I'm hoping I'll get a few weeks out of it. I wanted to really keep it simple, keep it within that same kind of neutral theme, and to make it feel quite rustic and festive rather than overtly Christmas. And so what I've done is added in a pine garland, which I actually also picked up from the flower market, which was super easy. I've just laid that on top, and then I've added inside a few pine cones just sort of here and there, and just squished them in just to make it feel more full and more together. And then what I've done is I've actually got some branches, faux branched floral branches. These are really lovely, and I've literally just put a few of them and poked them into the noble fir garland. You know, I've put some on one side and a couple on the other side, and honestly that was it. It didn't really need very much more. Just to top it all off, I got some bells, which I hope you can see in the middle, and those are actually from Dunelm. They are probably the nicest bells I've ever bought. They were incredibly reasonably priced, and I put a few of them on my Christmas tree, but I wanted one on the garland. So that's the final look. I absolutely love it, and I hope you do too. So I also thought it would be important to show you how I've made the rest of this little area feel more festive, rather than just sort of decorating the fire surround, which of course I love doing, but I wanted to fill it in by making everything feel pulled together. And so to bring in that element of warmth and rustic festivity, I've literally just taken a couple of pieces of wood from the fireplace and placed them on top of my coffee table books. Nothing else has really changed right here other than that. But again, I think that pulls in the fireplace and that whole sort of feeling in much better. And then just behind, I've used the same vase that I've had some dried hydrangea in for quite some time, pulled that out, and then added in literally 5 different cotton flowers. They're sort of cotton stem flowers, and they are really, really lovely. They add to that really warm, cozy feeling. So I love that, and I think they work really beautifully with the wood. And then what I wanted to do is make sure I had lots more throws. I kept a throw on this sofa, which I usually do anyway, because there's quite a lot going on. I've then kept the cushions here really plain and simple. These were actually cushions I had from my bedroom, so I've swapped around, and I often do that when I feel somewhere needs a refresh or I'm bored of seeing a particular cushion somewhere. I'll just swap around so that I can have one area looking a bit more refreshed. And then over here is a mini vase which I created myself. It looks wonderful, I love it. There is a mixture here. I wanted it to look really wild, festive and colourful almost, but with colours that I think pulled in all of the taupes and neutrals that I've got around the house this year for a more classic, timeless look. So here really I've got the mainly the Santini and the berries, and I honestly went and picked what I felt looked really warm and, you know, oranges and reds, so that I almost felt like I was falling in from the fall theme right up to the festive December Christmas theme. And I think that definitely works for now, but doesn't look overtly Christmas. So I really love that. And then over here, I've just added a really lovely rustic looking bauble that actually I just stumbled across on Dunelm. It looks really lovely, and I like to put a bauble around a nice arrangement because I just think it makes it look that little bit more festive. And then finally, everybody knows I love hydrangea, and I love them because I think they last for such a long time. And you know, once they're dried, they still look great. When they're fresh, they look great. But I loved this particular color of hydrangea because it's got these warm reds, but also these greens. And I think that really is the theme that's going through my house. This sort of warm touch of color, but mainly greens and taupes, you know, keeping it very neutral. This is the next section that I'm going to be talking about, and this is my entrance area. It is a small entrance area, but we have made it feel very grand. Again, keeping with that kind of festive, rustic theme, what I've done is used, for the first time ever actually, some really long, oversized pampas grass. There were lots of little bits flying around earlier, which apparently is quite normal with the pampas grass, but if you spray that with some hairspray, then it all stays very still. Then I've added in some dried branches, and really that made the whole of the vase up. I didn't really need to do very much otherwise, but what I have done is, again, at the flower market yesterday, picked up a pine garland and literally just placed that sort of half in my vase and half sort of sprawling out of my vase. I've changed nothing in this kind of console area other than to fill my shell bowl, which can feel not very Christmas, with lots of dried mushrooms, which again I just found in a big bag. I didn't know what they were actually, but they did end up being dried mushrooms. And again, some pine cones, just some little dried pine cones. And so that's really made it all work very well together. It looks gorgeous with the Fromental wallpaper backdrop, so that's really lovely. And then at the bottom, rather than do anything particularly fancy, I've laid in a throw inside one of our baskets. And these baskets are generally what my children use to throw in their shoes or bits and bobs, umbrellas. And to make it feel a little bit more festive, we have wrapped one of the kids' advent calendars and then finished that off with a red bow. So it definitely feels quite festive in this area, but as you can see, really there are only sort of a few main elements, and it's really kept quite pared back, quite simple, quite classic, and hopefully it feels quite timeless. Okay, so to make sure we pull the whole theme together and make sure everything works, you can probably sense already that there is definitely a theme of dried florals everywhere, and I love that because again, I think it is quite timeless. So in my TV area, to make it not feel isolated and to make it feel included with everything else that's going on, I filled up this vase over here with honestly some autumnal dried leaves that we had actually around the fireplace, and I've stuffed some in here. And then I have added some just dried branches that I found at the market, and they seemed quite light and cream, so I've used them here. It's really just lots of leaves all together, but a few more colourful leaves and something more neutral at the back. And then over here just by the front, because I felt it looked a little bit lonely, I've added, again just to pull that whole theme through, another dried mushroom that I found in a big bag of dried goods, and also one of the little baubles that I bought from Dunelm, which again you'll see I like to place by lots of my different flower vases because I think it just feels a little bit more festive. Okay, so in front of me is our ottoman/coffee table. I definitely usually have some books on here because I like accessorizing with books. But what I've done for this more Christmas themed vibe this year is really stack and open up many more books so that I feel, that adds real warmth into, that whole setting. And I've really tried to fill this table. So you can see I've accessorized a lot around the main area. I've got my remote control box, or one of them, over here, and I've added some of the wood again that I found in the fireplace and around the fireplace, and just added it to the coffee table just to pull that whole theme through. And then I've got a small mini bud vase which I've placed on a tray, and in the mini bud vase Again, I've got, just some of the stems that I'd taken that were leftovers from my larger arrangements. It works really beautifully here just to pull everything through together. The basket tidy that you can see right there on the end is really a family useful tool, I guess. I actually picked this up from Amazon. It's got 3 sections in it. One we use for pens, one we use for remote controls, and the other one we use for bits of paper that I don't particularly like, just spread around the table. So it's a really good tidy, but also it feels lived in and family-like. So, I think that really works together. There's a little bit of everything. There are some books, there's some florals, there's a sort of smarter box over here, something a little bit more rustic, a little bit more family, some things that are open, some things that are closed. And then again, like I said, I've pulled in the wood from the fireplace to make everything just flow more seamlessly. Finally, I'm just going to take you to my favorite vase this year. It is a very, very full vase of wax flowers, santini, and berries, and some really deep red berries. Now, it's very natural, it's very wild. This was my main theme for the home because, when I went to the flower market, I wanted to do something a little bit wild, not so overtly floral, just adding in the florals. There are different sized flowers, but also I've cut them at different heights so that it does give that feeling of a real wild bunch. Just below, I've decorated the area, very simply with 2 mini crackers that I picked up from Sainsbury's. My kids love them. I'll probably have to redecorate and keep filling them up with crackers, but honestly, it gives my kids a little bit of fun in the evenings and they love it. This is definitely my favorite area. It always feels very warm, and to be honest with you, these niches make everything feel very tidy. I haven't really tried to change anything in the niches. I think they do enough talking for themselves, but again, in terms of what I've done this year, and definitely not just now for Christmas, but also for fall, is I like, rather than having a neatly folded throw, to have something just thrown across the sofa, because I think it gives that extra feeling of warmth. We are all lit up. I'm super, super ready for this. Today, I've actually set the table as well as having my kind of centerpiece decor, which I did myself. So I've gone for pampas grass, in fact, kept in the dried eucalyptus that I had from fall. And I've just sort of arranged that together so it looks really beautiful, quite rustic, and almost still quite autumnal. Around that centerpiece vase, I've used some old cheese boards, some twigs that I got from the park, and stacked them up with some really large fir cones, pine cones, I'm not sure, they're the big ones anyway. And then from the flower market, I've got some really lovely tall slimline candles that I've put around the table, but instead of using a candelabra, I've literally just stuck them down on the table so that they feel a little bit more seamless, a little bit more airy, so that it doesn't feel like there's too much going on the table. I went to Wedgewood to buy some really beautiful plates. I'm going to show you. This was my inspiration for buying this set. And then I've got the larger plate, which I think is 23 centimeters, and the 19 centimeters on the top. And then super excitingly, when I walked into Harrods, they also showed me that they had this, which is a square underplate within the same design range, and I really love that. It really kind of works with my rustic themed Christmas this year, but it also feels like something I could use all year round, so I really do like that. It looks really beautiful as a complete set, so no placemat needed for this year's Christmas festive look. I've also this year gone for some cutlery that I've had my eye on for quite some time. This year I invested in a bamboo set, which is from Clio and Clover. This isn't a sponsored ad, I just absolutely love them. I also really love how light they feel, and they really work beautifully alongside my new Parkland set. On the side of the main set, I've got a little salad plate or side plate, and I have dressed that with just actually a very kind of normal linen napkin from home, but I've then used this absolutely stunning and handmade napkin ring, and I will link the name of where I bought this from below. It's a British company, really beautifully made. Every single one is handmade. They're absolutely stunning. I've not really seen anything quite like that. They really are very, very pretty, and again, work very, very beautiful with my sort of rustic overall theme. Okay, and finally, by the side of my side or salad plate, I have picked this really lovely tartan cracker. This was probably the most inexpensive thing on the table other than my cheese boards that I've had for quite some time. I think these were £15 from Sainsbury's. They worked really, really well with the rest of the setting, so I'm really pleased to have these. We go through so many crackers during Christmas time because, of course, I love to dress the table and the kids love to ask me on the weekends if they can open up the crackers. So we don't end up with very many for pretty much the first few weeks of Christmas. It's quite nice to just keep something that really looks beautiful, but I haven't gone out and spent loads of money on. In terms of the glassware that I've got on the table, I've really had these for a very long time. I've got Waterford set here, a glass and a wine or juice, whatever you want to put in it, but I quite like the different heights here. It's quite a classic set. I really do like it. I feel it works with every single type of dinner that I could have. Finally, just again, I know some people have already seen this on my dining table and chairs. I always love a throw. I think it makes the home feel so much warmer, and I will put a throw wherever I can have one. I love decorating the dining chairs at Christmas with throws. I really think it kind of pulls everything together and makes the whole scene and the atmosphere feel warm and cozy and very festive. And so for the big one, the Christmas tree. So for this year's Christmas tree, what I really wanted to do, first of all, in terms of position, is actually give it its own home. And usually I just kind of try and squish the Christmas tree somewhere where it doesn't really have a place and it's just had to sort of fit in and around other things. But what I love about what we've done here is really moved furniture to actually place it. And I think it makes this Christmas tree feel very prominent, you know, quite bold, and just like it feels like it was meant to be here. So in terms of theme, what we've done this year is choose one decoration that we fell in love with, and then we've just gone with that. So obviously we wanted a very classy, elegant, rustic themed Christmas, and rather than be very, very colourful, we wanted something quite neutral. So our first love were these Fortnum & Mason baskets. Now they are basically replicas of the large hampers that you'd get from Fortnum & Mason, and they are just mini versions. Now I'm absolutely in love with them. I love the basket. I love the neutral taupe feeling that gives, and the warmth and that almost kind of countryside feel. So what we've done is to really go with that. We've got some Hessian and raffia bows. Now I just had extra Hessian and raffia ribbon because I use them for lots of gift wrapping, and I've created lots of different bows in lots of different sizes and spread them throughout the tree because I felt it worked with that kind of taupe neutral theme. I've added in lots of different gold baubles. I've got a shiny bauble, a more matte bauble, a smaller one, a bigger one, and you know, I've just really kind of tried to spread that through the tree. I've even got a glitter one somewhere in there, so there is definitely a little bit of shine and a bit of Christmas glamour, but it's definitely more toned down. So I limited my kids to using only the gold decorations, and so we do have, if you'll end up sort of seeing inside the tree, some gold and even leopard butterflies, but they're sort of tucked in. And then I've also got some pine cones, which we've sort of carefully placed through the different branches to make sure that everything feels quite full. What I loved about what we did with the baubles this year is, rather than just have them hanging off the branches, we've actually taken some which didn't have the string on them any longer because of course they sometimes fall off, and we actually then took those and stuffed them inside the tree just so that the tree had a different depth and a different feeling, so that you could see on the outside that there were decorations, but also within the tree you can also feel that there are more decorative elements, and that does fill the gaps in between the branches, which I quite like. The only other thing I guess that we've added this year has been these bells. I accidentally came across some Christmas decorations on Dunelm, which I found online. They were incredibly reasonable. I've spread a couple around the tree. I possibly should have bought a few more. They were very, very reasonable. I just take one off to show you. It's so lovely. You've got, again, this really rustic ring and then these bronze colored bells with a little leaf and a pine cone in the middle. It's very, very cute, very rustic, works beautifully with that theme, and I just think it's really quite elegant. So altogether, that makes our tree, but of course I cannot forget the star on the top. And my little son was very adamant that we would have this star, so I got the biggest star I could find. I actually got it from the flower market. I didn't think I'd come across one there, but I did, so I picked one up, but I'm sure there are lots of different stars that you can find all over the place. But really, we've just tried to fill this up as much as possible, and it definitely is one of my favorite trees of all time, possibly my favorite Christmas tree that we've done so far. Just underneath, we've got these really beautifully decorated gifts. Now, a lot of these are actually advent calendars because of course it's a little bit too early to have bought all of our gifts yet, but there are some advent calendars wrapped up here. And what we wanted to do again is kind of stick to that rustic theme. So we've got really wrapped in a brown paper, very, very inexpensive way to wrap gifts. We've wrapped with the brown paper, and then we've got this really gorgeous velvet ribbon that we purchased. It's quite a wide setting ribbon, as you can probably see. And then we've allowed it to sort of trail off and then ruffled in the ends, but you know, kept everything quite rustic. So if you see a little bit of string here and there, we've kept that out. And then we've got some really lovely velvet boxes that I actually did pick up from the flower market and wrapped with the same velvet bow, so that you've got this element of, you know, rustic and more casual, but then we've made that all more elegant with the maroon in the bows and the velvet feel. So that really is kind of what we've done. Of course, we've then used a few different types of ribbon, just ribbon that we felt would really work with this theme. So we've got some tartan, we've got some stripes, but just all falling in line with that kind of countryside, rustic but glamorous theme. So just above the piano, because it's quite close to where we have the Christmas tree, again, I filled with what I had left of the different stems, another little bowl with some berries and some santini and some other bits. So really whatever I had, we just filled that up and made it feel quite rustic, but again, just falling in line with that whole look. Just past the dining table, we have this really lovely wreath, which was really a wreath just made from twigs. And I absolutely loved it because I thought it really worked well with this whole kind of feeling of classic, timeless neutrals. What I did was I actually bought a few dried pine cones and acorns and just stuck them in a sort of quarter of that wreath, and then just left it almost like a frame behind some existing accessories that I had. And I just think that makes this area feel much more rustic and festive than it would have, because, you know, frankly, before it was just more smart, whereas now it definitely feels a little bit more festive. I've then finished it all off with this really lovely Hessian extra large sized ribbon and just sort of tied it and scrunched it a little bit at the end. So, you know, it looks beautiful, and it definitely falls in line with the rest of the theme and the festive home. Okay, so what I have here as my kind of island centerpiece is something I actually created on the weekend with my kids. Now, I bought this really gorgeous wreath, make it your own set or kit, and I will actually link where that's from below, because they really did a beautiful job of, you know, everything that they packed in the box, and it really felt so enjoyable to do with the children. You know, I could have possibly done it with a group of adults or a group of kids. It was a lot of fun to do, and that was now, I guess, a week ago, so you know, a lot of this has dried but feels really, really smart still. What we did was we made this wreath, and it was really gorgeous, but I didn't really have anywhere to put it because I'd already bought the wreath for the door, and I didn't want to disappoint the children, but also it looks magnificent, so I really wanted to use it. So what I've done is I've actually taken the bowl at the bottom, which I had filled with hydrangea, and instead of having the hydrangea at the top, I've snapped off the stems and actually filled the bottom of the vase with those dried hydrangea. I then placed on top of the vase this really gorgeous wreath, and then what I've done, in fact a friend suggested that I do, was I stuck in a large candle in the center and then some smaller candles and slimmer line candles at the top, and then I've sort of pushed them down. You can see it wasn't an exact science, but I've pushed them down at different angles to make sure that they just came with different heights and felt a little bit more special. And then around the edges where I felt it was a little bit empty, I've added some different cream and gold candles and even a bauble in between one of the candles. And then I've even hung a bauble and some pine cones, some mini pine cones off one of the fir branches from the wreath. So I guess that was our makeshift centerpiece. It's worked really, really well. I may change it throughout Christmas, but I think it's so beautiful, and I love the fact that it was homemade, especially because it was homemade by my kids. So for now, I think it's, you know, one of my favorite pieces in the house. And just to show you at the end, they actually asked me to tie on a hessian ribbon to match with everything else that was going on in the tree. So that is pretty much my home tour in terms of our festive decor. I really hope that you've enjoyed walking around with me. Things will probably change a little bit coming towards Christmas with every different event that we have. But what I do really love about this year and this Christmas is we've tried to really keep it timeless. You know, there's not a lot in here that we couldn't really use for January, February, even March and April if we wanted to. So that was one of my top priorities this year, that I could really keep a lot of the decor and not have to throw everything away. I'm sure lots of you feel like in January the house becomes so bare and so empty feeling and so barren, that I think what's really lovely about having this kind of a timeless look is that actually you don't have to take everything down. I love that. I hope you've enjoyed this tour, and Merry Christmas.